Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's Friday Reflections on this Friday, the 24th of November 2023. I hope you are well wherever you're tuning into this from, although I am acutely aware that is not true for everybody. And, my heart goes out for those who are suffering. That said, it is good news that, inshallah, there should be a ceasefire. May only be a temporary ceasefire in the Holy Land, but at least, inshallah, that would allow people living in Gaza who've been living under bombardment and awful situation the past few weeks. At least it will give them chance to be able to get supplies, get a good night's sleep. It's not ideal. No one's suggesting it is, but it's, inshallah, it's a start. And we should pray for our brothers and sisters in Gaza and pray that the situation improves and that this ceasefire lasts and that some good opportunity comes to make a lasting peace and a just and fair solution for the people living there. But today, following on from a very successful event we held earlier in the week on Tuesday with Professor Joel Hayward from Cambridge Muslim College, who was discussing his two latest books, The Warrior Prophet and The Leadership of Muhammad. Today, I would like to read from his book, The Leadership of Muhammad, which I have read previously from a couple of chapters. And today I want to read from page 31, which is about understanding authority. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The Quran is clear that people within the community of belief are required to submit to the direction of not only the Prophet, but also of those in command among you. A hadith suggests that this verse initially related to Muhammad's appointment of Abdullah ibn Hudafa ibn Khais ibn Adi to lead a detachment of troops on a raid. In other words, God was saying that the Prophet's many appointees as leaders were also entitled to total obedience. The trilateral root Hamza Mim Ra occurs 248 times in the Quran, most commonly 166 times as the noun Amr, and 77 times as form I verb Amara, both referring to command or order. The trilateral root ta wa ain occurs 129 times in the Quran, most commonly 72 times as the form for verb ata, which simply means to obey. It is thus clear that leadership, according to Quran, involves a relationship between leaders whom God empowered to command and order, and the led, who must obey these leaders. The Quranic revelation is clear that Prophet's authority came from God. We sent no messenger but to be obeyed by the will of Allah. Jesus, alayhi salam, was empowered in this fashion and was to be obeyed. In Surah Al-Imran, we find, "And I, Jesus, have come, confirming what was before me of the Torah, and to make lawful for you some of what was forbidden to you. And I have come to you with a sign from your Lord. So fear Allah and obey me." This, of course, echoes with what we find in the New Testament, which quotes Jesus, alayhi salam, instructing his followers, if you love me, obey my commands. And asking, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and not do what I tell you? One should not be surprised to find Jesus demanding obedience. It was a privilege given to Hebrew prophets before him, as the Torah reveals. I will raise up for them from among themselves their own prophet, a prophet like yourself, in whose mouth I will put my words, and who will speak to them all that I command. And anybody who fails to obey the words he speaks in my name, I myself will call to account. The Quran likewise directly equates obedience to the Prophet Muhammad SAW with obedience to God. Whoever obeys the messenger surely obeys God. We find this explicitly stated in a hadith which quote Muhammad SAW stating, whoever obeys me obeys Allah, and whoever disobeys me disobeys Allah, and whoever obeys the leader I appoint obeys me, and whoever disobeys him disobeys me. One can therefore see that a prophet is in a unique leadership position, even more so than a senior military officer in today's world, whose formal status and position within the hierarchy grant him significant direct authority over those in his or her command, and the ability to initiate formal measures against anyone who disobeys a lawful instruction. A prophet can demand total obedience to any command, with divine punishment going to anyone who might disobey. As the Quran states, and whoever disobeys Allah and his messenger, and thus transgresses limits, will be admitted to the fire wherein they will live forever, suffering a humiliating punishment. So, I mean, this is something which we find throughout all of the kitab, all of the holy books that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to the various prophets throughout the ages. And we see this given in the examples here from Hazrat Isa alayhi salam in the New Testament, from Musa alayhi salam in the Torah, that Joel Hayward has quoted. And so we find the same with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was following in the footsteps of the previous prophets. He was a prophet like the previous prophets that was sent to Bani Israel and also to other nations. We're told in a hadith that 124,000 prophets were sent to a human family, and even scholars don't know who all of them are, because it's such a huge number. And even if you take the list of the prophets from the Holy Quran and a list of the prophets from the Jewish and Christian Bible that people accept as prophets, you don't get anywhere near 124,000. But nonetheless, this is something that from the Torah, the Gospel, and the Quran, a prophet is meant to be obeyed. And if a prophet is not obeyed, then this is also seen as disobedience to Allah. Whereas if you follow the prophet, if you obey the prophet, then this is seen as obedience to Allah. But as we shall see, there's caveats to this. It's not meant to be blind obedience, and especially to those who the Prophet ﷺ appoints after the time of the Prophet. This is not to say that even prophets are always obeyed. Sometimes Muhammad ﷺ found himself being disobeyed, much to his sadness. For example, during the Battle of Uhud, in March 625, members of his army disobeyed his explicit instructions by leaving a tactically crucial hill, thus causing a military defeat. The Quran directly addresses disobedience. Allah certainly fulfilled his promise to you when you were fighting the unbelievers by his permission. Even after we showed you what you wanted, you began to lose courage, started quarreling with each other, and disobeyed Allah's orders. Some of you want worldly gains, and others of you want rewards in the hereafter. Then he let you face defeat in order to test you. However, he forgave you. Allah is gracious to the believers. Another Quranic verse exhorted Muhammad ﷺ not to be disheartened, but rather to forgive the disobedient at Uhud and to stay gentle with them. As Allah relates in the Holy Quran, it was through Allah's mercy that you, Muhammad, have been able to deal with them so gently. If you had been stern and hard-hearted, they would surely have dispersed from around you. Forgive them and ask Allah to forgive them and consult with them again on affairs. Then, when you reach a decision, trust Allah. God loves those who trust him. Very important point now. I mean, many people forget as well. We should always have a trust in Allah. It's something all religions teach. We should trust in Allah and not human beings, because human beings will always let us down. But here, the verse is talking about how the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, although he was disobeyed, Allah is advising him it's best to forgive those people. And that if you forgive them, then it would be better. And otherwise, they would surely have left you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In 7th century Arabia, according to the Common Era calendar, obedience to leaders was expressed via a formal pledge of allegiance called bay'ah, a word derived from the Arabic root bay, which denotes both buying and selling. This pledge, therefore, was originally a transaction ratified by a handshake of the parties involved. It involved two-way responsibilities. Two-way responsibilities, with the leader implicitly or explicitly agreeing to lead fairly and wisely and possibly bestow largesse, and the other party agreeing to obey instructions and offer required service and any stipulated taxes or tribute. The concept that obeying Muhammad was the same as obeying God is evident in the sources. So before we carry on to that, so this concept of bay'ah was basically like what we now call a verbal contract. So you're used to having written contracts. So if, for instance, you contract some work on your house to have a wall fixed or something like this, or a roof repaired, they give you a contract and it's got your signature on it, it's got their signature on it. Also, when you buy a house or a tenancy agreement, there's a contract. But also for more simple things, people today also do this. They have a verbal contract. So for instance, I might see you're selling apples, I need apples. And I say, can you give me 10 bags of apples on Friday? And we agree a price and we shake hands on it. This is what bay'ah is like. It is something along those lines. Except in this particular instance, bay'ah is about accepting the leadership of a person, and that person also accepting that they have responsibilities to bestow wisdom and teachings upon the person who has accepted them as their spiritual leader. The concept that obeying Muhammad was the same as obeying God is evident in the sources. The Quran informs Muhammad, who in March 628 CE personally accepted with hand clasps the pledge of his followers. Immediately preceding the Treaty of Darbia, that those who pledge allegiance to you, it is to Allah that they pledge. The hand of God is above the clasps their hands. As for those who break their pledge, they do so only against their own souls. Those who fulfill their promise to God will receive a great reward. Thus, a pledge of allegiance with Muhammad was more than a mere transactional civil matter. It was also deeply religiously binding. Historian Lando Tassoron reveals its seriousness. Exchanging pledges with the Prophet, which was done by a hand clasp, was tantamount to bay'ah with Allah and constituted an unequivocal commitment to him. Such perception of the bay'ah elucidates the Islamic viewpoint that it is irrevocable. Withdrawing a bay'ah exchanged with the Prophet on behalf of Allah amounted to apostasy, which, like unbelief, is punishable by death. I kind of take issue with that last point, but this was the words of historian Ella Lando Tassaran. But as we see, even Joel Hayward, Professor Joel, he also explains this a bit better. There are literally hundreds of ahadith that convey the seriousness with which both Muhammad and his companions and followers regarded the bay'ah. Yet one should not mistake this formal pledge as an inflexible, fear-based substitute for good leadership. That Muhammad's followers feared him and the consequences of breaking their pledge and only obeyed him because of that fear. On the contrary, as will be shown below, Muhammad ﷺ possessed remarkable gifts of inspiration and persuasion. His followers served him with dedication and tremendous respect and affection. Even the bay'ah sworn to him was gentler in intent than the rather ominous-sounding Quranic verses above, or what they would suggest if you read without context. It contains a do your best kind of qualifier. For example, in Sahih al-Bukhari, we find this hadith: whenever we gave the pledge of allegiance to Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to listen to and obey him, he used to say to us, for as much as you can. For as much as you can. In modern words, to the best of your ability. Similarly, when Muhammad ﷺ entered Mecca in 630 CE at the head of an army of 10,000 and occupied his old hometown without bloodshed, promptly forgiving its citizens for 8 years of fighting and many years before that of ridicule and persecution, he duly asked for their collective pledge of fealty. In front of the Kaaba, the holy house in Mecca's center, he accepted their promise to listen to him and to obey him as best as they could. The pledge itself ordinarily followed a formula involving, along with the clasping of hands, a promise to listen to the Prophet ﷺ and to obey his instructions, to associate no gods with Allah, and to live well according to Islamic teachings, to be good to other Muslims, and perhaps also to undertake a particular task, such as to emigrate to Medina, or to participate in a raid or battle on behalf of the Islamic polity. The phrase to listen to and obey the Prophet ﷺ occurs in virtually every hadith discussing bay'ah and places upon the follower an active rather than a passive responsibility to try to understand Muhammad's intentions. Whether one liked a tasking or not, the subordinate had to obey. Aware that some leaders might rely on this concept of obedience to compel subordinates to do unethical things, Muhammad explained that trying to understand what one was told to do and why the listening was as important as carrying out the instruction, the obedience, with critical thinking being necessary to determine whether the instruction was a righteous task. So the important thing is not just to obey, but also, after the Prophet ﷺ, nobody else was a prophet. The Prophet ﷺ, obviously, he only gave good instructions to people. But the Prophet ﷺ knew that the people who come after him, even though they had his ijazah, or the preceding generations had the ijazah of those who came before them, the permission, the right, but not all of them are going to be, well, none of them are going to be as pious as the Prophet ﷺ, and not all of them are going to be pious. So some of them might make mistakes in their instructions, or might say things which the Prophet ﷺ would not have agreed with, or would not have instructed people. So it's important that even though you have bay'ah with someone, be that a sheikh, be that a leader today, or any time after the Prophet ﷺ, that you check if that is actually a good thing or not. You use your own wisdom to the best of your ability. Muhammad ﷺ was gentle and flexible when he recognized sometimes that a greater good might be accomplished by releasing someone from a vow. When a young man happened to tell him that his pledge to emigrate with him, presumably to Medina, had made his parents cry, he humanely said, "Go back to them and make them smile, just as you had made them weep." Obedience was also unrequired if any instruction violated the principles of Islam or even of common sense, understood to be what is well known to be good. For example, after swearing to obey a troop leader appointed by the Prophet ﷺ, certain soldiers were slow to build the fire the leader had demanded. He then became enraged, ordered them to build a fire and to throw themselves into it. They duly built the fire, but then before throwing themselves into it, demurred and said to the leader, "We followed the Prophet ﷺ to escape from the fire," i.e. hell. "How should we enter it now?" The fire subsided and the commander's temper cooled. When Muhammad ﷺ heard of this, he said, if they had entered it, i.e. the fire, they would never have come out of it, i.e. they would have remained in hellfire. For obedience is only required in what is good. One can also imagine the enthusiasm that accompanied pledging allegiance to Muhammad ﷺ. Breaking the pledge would evoke God's wrath, but conversely, keeping it would bring spiritual rewards, including paradise, described in the verse quoted above as a great reward, and even success and blessings in this life. We thus find even powerful men pledging allegiance with a promise of earthly benefit. We have a record, for example, of Amr ibn al-As, a Meccan antagonist of Muhammad ﷺ, finally swearing allegiance to Muhammad on the condition that his past sins were pardoned and that the Prophet ﷺ gave him an active part in his affairs, which he did so. Amr went on to become a great Islamic hero who led the Muslim conquest of Egypt and served as its governor in 640 to 646 and 658 to 664 CE. Reward for obedience was not unusual. After all, the Quran is clear that loyalty and obedience to the Prophet ﷺ would bring earthly benefit. Regarding those who pledged their bay'ah at Hudaybiyah, the Quran says, certainly, Allah was pleased with the believers when they pledged allegiance to you under the tree, and He knew what was in their hearts. He sent down tranquility on them and rewarded them with an imminent victory and much war booty that will capture. Allah is Almighty and wise. So you see, there is on this point about understanding authority is very important, because every society, every community needs to have a structure, needs to have an understanding of who has the authority, who has the right to make decisions, and what kind of a process that takes. And in the next chapter, Professor Joel talks about consultative leadership, because the Prophet ﷺ also used shura. I'll just read this not the chapter, but this paragraph here. Shura is a form of peer consultation and participatory decision-making found amongst Arab leaders at all levels. Its origins predate the coming of Islam. It involves the discussion of problems or issues by peer groups with a view to determining a way forward through dialogue, respectful debate, and collective decision-making. It seems ideally suited to tribal societies where members of different tribes can meet as peers to decide matters of mutual concern, or where elders within a tribe can meet to provide advice or act as agents of accountability for a chief. Now, this is how the Prophet ﷺ made decisions. He didn't just command people, but he also had he developed this shura committee around him, and he discussed with them the issues. But still, there needs to be an understanding of who is, in Arabic, emir, who is in modern English, the chairman, or the managing director, or the CEO, or, there needs to be someone who organizes things and who takes the ultimate responsibility for the final decision. Because otherwise, if you don't have that and you just have a group of people sitting around a table, maybe they'll never arrive at a final decision. There has to be someone who listens to all of them and then fairly makes a decision and moves forward. But you need like these committees or these parliaments or these kind of councils, and then you need people to make a decision. And you need that kind of authority, and you need the rest of the people around them that come under their authority to obey them, as long as obviously what's being decided is generally for the best of the community and for good, or for the best within the company or the organization. This is an important concept to understand, and if we don't understand this concept, if we don't follow this concept, then it can actually lead to an awful lot of problems. There's an English saying of too many chiefs and not enough Indians. Maybe it's in modern times, it's not necessarily the best language to use, but it gets the point across. If there's too many people trying to be the boss and there's not enough people doing the work, then nothing's going to happen. No progress is going to be made, because ultimately any project, any kind of action on the society level needs a group of people to actually work on that and to implement, whether it is building a bridge or a building, whether it is a political organization and it's a matter of policy, or whether it's a company and it's a new product. Whatever it is, it needs a group of people to actually implement whatever decisions are made. So if everybody's making their own decisions, it can lead to a lot of problems. And also the people who make the decisions have to have the right kind of knowledge and understanding and wisdom to be able to come to some kind of good decisions. So this is very important. And the Prophet ﷺ, he gave us some good insights into that, which we can benefit from. And alhamdulillah, there's so much we can learn from the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday reflections, and thank you for tuning in. And I look forward to seeing you, inshallah, on Monday for my Sohbet and Sufi meditation. And I wish you all a very good weekend. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and blessings of God be with you all.